I have a dream that every male would know there is a masculine journey to be taken, that every man would pass the test of manhood so he would know that he is enough, that every wife would feel the love of unconditional love of a husband, that every daughter would know what a real man looks like, and every child would feel the love of his father. My dream is that every man would live a life of adventure that would inspire those around him, that every man would have the courage to fight for what is right and what is just, that every man would know his purpose is to raise other men up.
Alrighty. Every man fights battles no one sees. Some happen in the boardroom. Some happen in the mirror. The toughest ones happen in silence, in here, between who we've been to who we are becoming. Today, I'm joined by a man who's lived a fight in every form. Former professional boxer, father of 7, that's right, 7, and founder of Man Alive, Gavin Topp, has gone from throwing punches in the ring to helping men stop fighting themselves. He's proof that strength isn't found in domination, it's found in direction. I like that. That being a man isn't about being hard, it's about being whole. So if you've ever drifted from your mission, if you've ever felt like success came with a silent cost, this episode will hit you where it needs to. Let's step into the forge and talk about what it really takes to live man alive. Gavin, great to be with you, mate.
Mate, thank you so much for inviting me, for having me. This is awesome, mate. What a pleasure.
And you're tuning in from a long way from me, mate, from Brisbane, Australia to Gozo over in Malta.
That's right. We're about 26 miles from Sicily and where I am, and about 80 miles from Africa. So in the
Wow.
middle of the Mediterranean. Yeah.
Wow. Very cool.
Yeah.
Do you speak Maltese yet, or you learning, or?
Oh, mate, I've actually, since I've been here, I've actually spent a bit of time in Italy. And I think it's easier. Everyone says Maltese language is the hardest language. Like yeah. So I'm going to say no, but I certainly have a go at it. But what's one of the great things? Well, one of the things that's been good since we've been here is my two youngest kids are in school here, so they're picking it up. They actually in school they learn Maltese, they learn Italian. So yeah, mate. So there's a lot going on in the house. I don't even know what's happening sometimes with all the different languages.
Wow, and yeah, it'll be quite a multicultural sort of vibe over there.
Yeah, all in my own home.
Ah, yeah, all righty, cool. Before we dive into legacy and leadership, brother, take us back to the ring. Who was Gavin Topp before Man Alive?
Yeah. Well, I suppose, mate, one of the things I always like, our environment shapes us. And growing up, I had a mum and dad who loved me to bits. They always, I suppose probably where I get it from, if everyone's going that way, I'm always saying, what's over there? They kind of, what they did was when I was growing up, my parents would buy and sell businesses. Okay. So it kind of, I was always destined really to never work, to always look for the other way, So they had caravan parks, service stations, takeaway food shops, a couple of pubs, mate, roadhouses out the Northern Territory. So I suppose when I was always seen to be going to a new town as well. And when you're the new kid in town, you always seem to get into a fight. Well, that was my story. So that kind of encouraged me. Well, my dad, I remember my dad saying to me, son, we're going to teach you how to fight. And I remember thinking, I would love to know, because I seem to have the courage or I wouldn't back down anyway, but couldn't deliver. So it was nice to be able to get to a gym and kind of learn. And I remember he took me to a gym that he fought in. So it was great. You know, talk about legacy. It's kind of pretty amazing to even have the same trainer, as my dad did, initially. So yeah, but mate, I had a great, I suppose it was almost like, I don't know, man. It was like I kind of not failed. Like the education system didn't work for me, you know. Um, but so my dad got me involved in a few different sports. And I used to, even at one point I was riding horses, and I actually become an Australian champion when I was a kid at 14, and whatever I did, I'd just give 100%. And I suppose that's just, I don't know, my makeup or the way I was raised, because my parents would buy these businesses that were run down. That's kind of was their formula. Buy something that was nearly broke. Get in 18 months later, sometimes 2 years later, built it up, get some 2 new tax returns and then sell it for the profit, and then buy something else that was run down. So, I mean, one of the best things my dad ever taught me was a business that takes no inventory. If you don't know what's going in and going out, your business ends up broke. So he had a knack for finding these businesses who didn't take an inventory or didn't do it well anyway. So mate, when I got into boxing after, just really wanting to square things up, I was resentful from getting beaten up too many times, and then I got into the boxing, as an amateur, as a teenager. So yeah, that's how I started. I mean, mate, and anytime I can talk, mate. So you just interrupt. You got any questions as I go? But I remember at one point, and I remember, I suppose to give people a bit of insight, I had a drinking problem, but I didn't know. Okay, it's one thing to have a drinking problem, but there's another thing to not know about. It was like everyone knew except me. And I remember at one point when I was 18, and I remember thinking, I just got to get back to the gym, okay? Because I had these drinking buddies, then I had my gym buddies, and they kind of really didn't know each other. I was either one or the other, But I remember I remember having this thought, if I could just get to the gym and get away from these drinking buddies, they're killing me. So I got to the gym. I trained a couple of days in a row, and my coach says to me, "Listen, son, if you train every day this week, I'll get you a fight on Friday night." And I remember thinking, that'll keep me away from those blokes. So I fought, and I don't know how, but I won the fight. Like with a couple of days preparation, I won the fight. And he grabbed me before I got to the bar, and he goes, "Listen, don't drink, get to the gym Monday, and we'll do the same again next week, and I'll get you another fight." I'm thinking, I'm buzzing from the fight, and so I did that, and I won the following Friday night as well. And I didn't know at the time. I found out towards the end, but it was like a round robin of state and then Australia, and I end up having 8, and I kept, you win, you go to the next week. I ended up having 8 fights in 7 weeks and ended up coming third in Australia. And to be honest, I was happy to lose that last one. Man, I wasn't fit. I was tired. I got my nose broke in the third week. So I was fighting with a broken, oh man, it was torture, But I remember at the end of that, it was like the season, I come third in Australia, and kind of everyone sort of has 3-4 months off, till the next season starts the following year. And I remember thinking, what the heck am I going to do? And I had this idea. I had this thought. I don't even know where it come from, because my dad had a caravan park at that time. And what it was, right? There was backpackers from it was up North Queensland, and it attracted all these backpackers and fruit pickers. So I met all these people that were coming from everywhere. And I remember the thought was, I wonder if I went traveling, it would make a man out of me. I just had this thought. So I booked a one-way ticket and went went to about a dozen different countries. Before mobile phones, before I knew where I was going, I didn't know where what I was doing. I remember flying. I mean, there are so many stories, man. Yeah, I remember one how naive I was. Okay, I remember I spent a couple of days in Singapore, and I remember this guy goes to me, "Hey, I met in the backpackers." He goes, "Listen, I'm going to go," because I was going to Thailand to meet some guys from the caravan park. And he goes, "Listen, I'm going to go to Malaysia and then up to Thailand. Do you want to come?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll come, but aren't we in Malaysia?" And I thought Singapore was the capital of Malaysia. Like, I didn't know it was its own country. I was so naive. It was scary. It was dangerous. But anyway, I end up, man, I survived. And without going, I remember there's so many stories. I remember one time just how out of control I was as a young man. I remember I must have been maybe 21. And I remember being in Amsterdam and through guys I'd met in Thailand, taking ecstasy and playing up in all these full moon parties, they call them. And they said, if you come to Amsterdam, we'll give you a job. And I'm like, sweet. I had the world to conquer. I didn't know where I was going, what I was doing. So they said, meet me in like a month or two. I got some month or two. So I went to the Himalayas. I heard some people going there. Anyway, I ended up in this Amsterdam where I was there. And I remember I was there maybe about 2 months. And it was a different world to what I was used to. Been in Asia for months and what have you. But I remember getting home one morning after playing up all night and on ecstasy or what have you. And I remember someone saying, I was living with, he goes, they were talking about the date and what have you. And I remember getting the airline ticket, when you got that bit of paper. And I remember finding it. It was a miracle that I had it. One time in Thailand, I literally gave all my clothes away and I was living on this nudist beach for 3 months. I don't know how I hang on to that airline ticket. But I remember looking at the airline ticket. I realized I didn't know what the date was, which is probably not too bad. But then I realized I didn't know what month I was in. And I kind of started to think, oh, this is a bit out of control here, like, and then I'd realized I'd actually booked a plane and I'd missed it by 3 weeks. And the worst bit was I was actually, I hadn't even made it to that country yet. I was in the wrong country. Like, I remember thinking, I'm going to ring my old man. And I remember having a phone box, going to the phone box and reverse charges, ringing him up. And I remember him saying to me, "Mate, do you think you got a problem?" And I remember getting the old school phone on the court. I remember getting the phone, giving him a mouthful, and just started smashing the phone on the glass. Like, I don't know, he triggered me, I think we'd say these days. Back in those days, mate, you didn't use those words. But long story short, mate, they got back to Australia and and I ended up in there's a whole story, how I ended up in this drug and alcohol kind of rehab place. And there was a guy there that come up to me, and I kind of knew of him, because he'd been a fighter. And I remember there was a time where I trained in the gym and he was there, and he come up and he sat down, and long story short, it was like he put his fingers in my chest, and he goes, "Son, there's something in you that only you can fulfill. There's a mission. There's a purpose." And I knew he was right. I just didn't know how or what to do. So he really got my attention, and I said, "Well, mate, because I felt like I'd blown it. I'd missed my opportunity. I'd blown it." And the dream was I wanted to actually be a fighter. So I said, "What have I got to do?" He goes, "Well, I'll see you back here tomorrow. Don't drink between now and then. Can you do that?" I said, "I can do that." And so I did that. And those days turned into weeks, and he started to introduce me to some other blokes, and he took me through the 12 steps of recovery, and I did that, and that dream, and then I got back to the gym, and I guess like I'm the way I'm built, I just was 100%, man. I'm all in, you know. And I started getting some fights some fights happening, and then he started to introduce me to this transition from boy to man. He started to introduce me to this concept of a transition, of a rite of passage, and I kind of looked at what I'd been through, whereas my rite of passage was get drunk, get a girl, get into a fight, and it generally happened outside the pub when the pub was shut. That was when the initiation happened, and that hurt, man. It didn't really make me a man, So anyway, mate. Long story short, I just followed my dream, and I did, and I took those rite of passage concepts and I implemented them, and literally, I remember it really hit me about 6 months into that sobriety, and like the facade had come down. And I remember reaching a point where I couldn't, it was very humbling because I didn't have, like, my wife, right? We've been together since we were kids, since we're teenagers. That girl has been to hell and back, man. You mentioned before why I'm here. I'll tell you about that, But I remember about 6 months sober, and we didn't have enough money to eat. Like, we were getting food vouchers. I started getting stuff from the tip and selling it at cash converters. Like, we were not going well. And I'm meant to be going well, like I'm sober now, And but mate, long story short, I went from there, like 4.5, 5 years later in sobriety. We'd actually we'll fight. I was the Australian champion. I was fighting on Fox Sports on a regular basis. We at that point we'd brought 4 houses, you know. We had a couple of kids, like life. I had a business with a dozen blokes working for me. It just it happened so fast, man. Mate, and then that was really just the start. It was really just the start, Mate, you just hop in any time because then I started to go to another level, And I fought up until I was 34. I was very fortunate, to have a good career. Well, I did my best, man. I got to do what that guy said. I got a poke in the chest. I want to go for it, man. I'm going after what's in me, and that's what I did.
So he was what we call, ladies and gentlemen, the mentor. That moment when you had that realization that the opponent wasn't in front of you anymore, like a boxer, traditional boxer, front forward facing. It was within. Battle was within. He was poking you in the chest to stop denying and look within. Would that be fair to say?
100%, mate. And I would say, I remember my first ever amateur fight, like 16, and I remember I remember that first round nearly getting knocked out. Like, the referee stopped and put an 8 count on me, and I remember going back. I didn't think I was going to make it through the next round, but I remember my coach told me just a couple of small things, and when I went out there for the second round, I realized I didn't know what I was doing. and I still said, I guess, did what he said: right hand up, use my reach, get my left jab, double my jab when I hit him with the first time, bang it up, And mate, I turned that fight around, and I learnt that day a cornerman can see what I can't, a mentor can see what I can't, a coach can see what I can't. So, once I really sorted myself out, I look at my adult life. I'm not game to do it Gav Topp's way. I try my way. I'm very open. I'm always hanging. I don't go without a mentor. Like, I leave tomorrow. I'm flying from here. I'm going to Florida to see my mentor. Mate, this time this is my third time this year to America, you know? Man, I don't care where I have to go to get the best, you know? So, yeah,
Wow.
sorry, mate, I butt in.
But that's all right. That's all right. Yeah. I'm off to America next month, first time. So I'm looking
Yeah,
forward to that. It'll be the massive moment of my life.
come on.
Yeah, bring it on, bring it on. Sometimes you're right. You got to travel to get the best coaching, the best mentoring, because
Yes.
some of the best mentors have the best sets of eyes to see
Mm,
what we can't see.
yeah.
Those, yeah, and to bring the best out of us, what we sometimes can't ourselves. Yeah. So you've said it before, Gav. I've picked it up earlier. Men don't fall apart overnight. We call it drift, or I call it drift. And this is what the Legacy Forge podcast is all about: is defining the legacy and the moments of when men drift. And I mean, you've had your drifting moments as a young fella in your 20s, somewhere in Asia or somewhere in Europe, sprawled out on the drink, on the
Yep.
drug, with a Sheila in hand, perhaps recovering from a punch up somewhere. Yeah. That
Were
made
you
you.
there? Sorry, mate, go on.
Graham, how does drift, and I'll anchor that in drift for all the new listeners out there, is these uncompromisable behaviors that show up in our lives, not just in men, in women as well, just in a little different energetic way. And it does cash in. The invoice does cash in. What that could look like: not keeping your word to yourself or others, addictions, if you're in business, if you're a leader, betraying the trust of your team. It costs you money, time, trust, and most of all, respect from peers, respect from your team, and respect from your loved ones. So you're very passionate in the men's movement, equally as I and many other men that surround us. How does drift show up in the men that you mentor?
Yeah, I think, I suppose probably even before I get to there, mate, probably the sort of man that I am, and I suppose the way that I've learnt through other men and incorporated myself, whereas I create personal oaths to live by, you know. And like when I got sober a while, the first oath I ever made to stop the drifting, man, you know, is the when it comes to drugs and alcohol, it was not any, not ever, no negotiation. Like there's no compromise, which enables. And actually, I think it's easier to do that because it takes away the compromise, and I mean, I remember, another time it comes up, when I become the Australian champion and had a phenomenal business. It was a bricklaying business, and we were literally all got all these opportunities. When you're the champ, you get the opportunities. They present themselves like. So I got these opportunities this guy goes, I heard you're a half a bricklayer. I can't sponsor you, but if you can get some guys together, I can get you all this work. I'm like, okay. So I run an ad in the paper, got some brickies working for me. I laboured to them because I didn't know, but I knew a little bit, but not enough. But anyway, I remember doing that for a few years. And that's how we started buying houses, right? But I remember my wife I had two kids then come to bring me lunch. And I remember, and this is like we talk about drift, right? Mate, there's a lot of blokes just doing the same thing, in that industry. I love the industry, but I recognise it wasn't for me. And I remember I'm at the mixer. Kids have got the lunch. My kids are playing in the sand. Two brickies who work for me walk past and they looked at my son and they go, oh, they joked around. They thought, they were meaning, well, he'll be laying bricks with us soon. And I remember in that moment, I said to myself, no, he won't. No, he won't. And I made a decision. I was getting out of bricklaying. Your one for legacy was about this ain't what I am doing. So that job, because I do 150 houses at a time or 100, that job went for another 3 months. I never did another job. The guys that were working with me for, I gave them all the gear. I gave them the contracts. I gave them everything. Thought, I've got to burn the bridge here. So I didn't sell it. I gave it away. That I'm going to sow good seed, you know. So I think when it comes to drift, that one thing that if you don't make decisions and back it with action, mate. No, it's worse than drift. I reckon you end up in other people's drifts. That's even worse. It's a bit like I'm always one for purpose and mission. If you don't understand your purpose, by default, you'll follow somebody else's. Yeah, and I think that's killing more men. That's breaking more hearts than anything else. You know, and hence that's how I suppose I remember having another mentor, and he's a Christian fellow who would pray with me and what have you, and I remember he was quite successful, in business and whatever. And I love spending time with him. I train him. I just love spending time with him. But I remember being in his office one time, and we're talking about the next season of my life. I'm out of that business. I'm not fighting. I retired as a fighter. And what's the next season look like? And I remember him saying to me, "What's in your hand?" And I'm like, "What's in my hand?" He goes, "What's always been in your hand?" It's always been a boxing glove. Like, that's the picture I got in my mind, you know? And I'm like, how the heck does that work? Because, me being a faith man, God gives us certain gifts and talents and passions. Craig, you're built a certain way. You just lean a certain way for a particular purpose and reason. And there's probably some stuff that people say to you, man, how do you do it? You go, I don't know, I'm just do it. And you're brilliant at it. Am I right? You
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
even
yeah.
have to really try just that way, where I believe every man has something unique to them, and that which is attached, to their legacy, man, to the purpose, to the mission, to the legacy. So I endeavored to pursue that, you know, not knowing what I was doing, how I was going to do it, and just one thing led to the next thing. And that's how I actually made a comeback, because I realized, as a fighter, I realized that I'd only ever set my vision was only to beat the Australian champion. And once I reached that, really the fire left me, the passion left me, and I couldn't explain it. I didn't even know how or why, you know. But I realized that's what had happened. I didn't think big enough. There was more in me. And that's what I thought. I wonder if I set a goal to be the world champ, you know. And I started, I was already fit. And anyway, long story short, I didn't do that. I ended up being ranked 12th in the world, but I was able to fight a world title eliminator. In Germany, I did my best. And I think, when you talk about with men drifting and what have you, people drifting, I think the problem is they don't think big enough. They end up thinking at average of what they could do. So their heart's not really engaged. Their heart's not really fully committed. And I think, and I'm sure, you said you got a lot of women that listening, and I run men's programs. Although I've got 5 daughters, and I love women more than anything. I talk to men all the time, but I think what's really breaking this modern society down is because men aren't thinking big enough. They don't develop courage. Particularly when you have a purpose, a mission that's bigger than you, that you don't know how to do. That requires a tremendous amount of courage and faith, and you got to grow into that, man. Nobody's born like that. It's like, you got this, man. What you gonna do with it? God says you can move mountains, but He also says, "Hey, bring a shovel, son. You're gonna need to do something." So, yeah, does that answer your question, mate? Goodness.
It does. It certainly does. As a man of faith, they call it the proto consciousness, or the metaphysical purpose. So, or in plain English, off planet. Off planet being spiritual, metaphysical, away from the material. We're not just getting driven by the toys and the luxuries of society. It's greater than that. It's off this
All that
planet.
stuff's gonna pass, man.
Yeah, 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 yeah. we're driven by the grace of God, the blessing of God, or whoever, whoever you resort to. He's given you the shovel, you'll lay the groundwork, yeah? And that legacy becomes from an on planet to that off planet. And I see a lot, and I meet a lot of visionary leaders who have that fire, that zest. It's taken them a while, and it's taken them a journey to get there. However, once they grasp that flame within their hearts, they become unstoppable and resilient. Take on that courage to go that next level. You've got it. I've got it. A few other key men around me have got it, and we each model that to the other men coming in.
Well, mate, I wanna maybe go against you. I don't know if I got it, man, but I'm on my way. I'm not where I wanna be, but I'm glad I'm not where I was.
Certainly coming from a boxing background. I mean, I had a bit of a go at boxing as a young fella. I mean, I lasted 4 fights and got knocked TKO'd and thought that was it for me.
Yep.
By one fella that stood 6 foot over me, and he just went 4 punches on me, and I just couldn't handle it. I was on the canvas, and I thought that was it. Bugger that. But yeah, you certainly got it in you. Coming from a fighter. If you could hand every man listening a tool, or a woman, to cut the drift today, what would it be?
Cool, man. I got a lot of tools. I got tools, but you only need one. I suppose if I could hand one man tool, because every man's different. Every man's at a different stage. So it's not, I don't believe it's as cut and shut as that. You know, particularly I talk about in my Rite of Passage for the Modern Man ebook, you know, I talk about, the 7 pillars of a Rite of Passage. But one of the things that I start with that I used to in that transition as a fighter to then follow my dream, I created a boxing program for men that never had a fight. Um, you know, 10 weeks and then I'm gonna put on a big massive event at the casino or convention center or somewhere where we'd have up to 1,000 people sometimes, you know. If I could hand one man a tool, I would say, I'll tell you what my tool is. How's that? I won't just tell you what to do. I'll show you what to do. So I would start these events with 1,000 people. I would get all the lights turned off. Okay. Everyone's suited up. I'd be on the stage, right? And I have all the fighters and cornermen behind me. So there might be 50 men with fighters and cornermen, right? I'd be in the middle. I'd get all the lights turned off. Spotlight would come on me. You understand? People think they're coming to a boxing fight night, right? And I would start with a 3-piece suit. And I used to have a massive big moustache, right? I'd say, my name's Gavin Topp, and I have a dream that every male would know there is a masculine journey to be taken, that every man would pass the test of manhood so he would know that he is enough, that every wife would feel the love of her unconditional love of a husband, that every daughter would know what a real man looks like, and every child would feel the love of his father. My dream is that every man would live a life of adventure that would inspire those around him, that every man would have the courage to fight for what is right and what is just, that every man would know his purpose is to raise other men up. I'd say that's my dream for Craig. That's my dream for these listeners. That's my dream for everyone who's ever going to come in contact with me or even hear about me. That's my dream. So I'll say one tool, have the courage to follow your dream. Like, have the courage to actually start to master a dream, to dig down deep, to explore what is it you really want. Because I don't know how many days I've got left. I don't know how many days you've got left. Yeah, even moving away from Australia in 23, in 24, I had 2 uncles put off all this stuff. They retired. One was 62, one was 64. Within months of retirement, they both got diagnosed with cancer. And then after that, one of my wife's aunties, 59, retired on a Tuesday, wasn't feeling well on the Thursday, right? And then went to the doctors on the Friday. They said, you got 3 weeks to live. So, man, there's 3 examples of waiting to live their dream. If I just get enough money, if I just get enough time, once the kids are grown up, once this, once that, man, I ain't waiting. I'm going full tilt. And what I've realized is, mate, with particularly men and leaders, and even, women as well, but I mean, I'm a leader of 7 children and my wife. When I go full tilt on my dream, you know, it gives everyone around me permission to go full tilt on their dream. Well, another one of my oaths is that I would show my kids that dreams can come true. Hence, I've got a dream, man. They've got to see me actually take action. Another dream of mine, how I ended up here, was that, my wife's, man, she's amazing. Supported me, like all of our adult lives since we're teenagers, Uh, the most amazing woman I've ever known, had 7 children, all natural, breastfed them all. She's the best, like she's the best, right? But so I made an oath a few years ago that I wanted her dreams to come true, not just living her life for a husband or for her children. So she had this dream ever since, man, we were kids. I remember, grandfather, him making me all this Maltese food in Sunshine, Melbourne, where, the spaghetti, the rabbit stew, because her family have 2 bits of real estate here in Malta. So it was her dream to spend a season in Malta. And we were actually going to, before 9/11 happened, where father was alive, and we didn't go because we got talked out of it, man, with 9/11. And then he was too old and what have you. So I wanted her to live her dream. That's how we ended up here. So I heard stories, Craig, of one of their properties here in Malta, right? That's 430 years old. It's been in their family for 160 years, right? Her father was born there. So a couple of years ago, my wife and my eldest son, they come to Malta without the rest of us. And she told me about, like, she walked into this house and her aunt, they still live there. Her grandmother's sister goes, that's that room, that's where your father was born. They walk, see, and they go, that then the next room, that's where your grandmother was born. Like, if she was still alive, like 100 years ago, and then there was this well in the middle of the house. Okay. She goes, they're drinking the water. My son and she goes, I remember when your father, 70 plus years ago, had his first drink out of that well. Like, man, I wanted to taste that water. I wanted my children to drink that water. I'm always talking about legacy. I'm always talking about, like, particularly with this digital world, I'm creating things that my children's children's children are going to benefit from. When I create videos on YouTube, on the Gavin Topp YouTube channel, I'm thinking in 200 years. I'm thinking in 400 years. So that's why I wanted to come to Malta, mate, to taste the water of the legacy water. So, yeah.
Definitely. And I'm hearing a lot of modeling, mentoring, modeling, and I'm also hearing legacy could be defined as leaving steps for others to follow, like leaving blueprints
100%.
to follow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
And that's why when I came here 2 years ago, and, like, you know, so, well, actually 6 come. Me older son, he's a bit like his old man. He's off around the world. He was, I don't know where he was, in Mexico or something. He's in Argentina now. But anyway, but then he come over here for the summer. So it was just to have such a unique experience. I mean, not this house, the other house I was in the first year, man, it was 300 years old. Like, I wanted to, what's that? Like, what does that feel like? Out my office door right here, there's a citadel, fortified city. It's 3,500 years old. Like, it's just, at my other house at the end of the street, because I wanted my children to experience what it was like to live in a village. At 11:30, in particular, not summer, but in winter, everything's shut, everyone's gone, ghost town, siesta. Like, I wanted to experience what that was like. The other house I lived in, there's the temples there that are older than the Egyptian. What do you call them? Goodness, man, gone blank. They're like 5,500 years old. Like, man, legacy, woo, another level.
Learn from our elders. We learn from history a lot. Mm,
Yeah. And I think that's the thing, particularly with this next generation coming through. There's, I actually think I did a video on YouTube a while ago about the most interesting people in the world. And what I'm teaching my kids, well, what I'm endeavoring, they're overtaking me, man, in so many areas. but I'm always talking to them about creating rather than competing. We're in this age where we can create whatever we want. We've got access to whatever we want, you know? So rather than being in a competitive mindset, and I think that's the whole idea, when we learn from our elders, we don't want to repeat the old stuff. I mean, there's this, when it comes to values and integrity, yes, 100%. But there's so many other things I'm saying to my kids. Run, man, run, go. What I say to a lot of men that I mentor, particularly when we go through like we're going through the mastermind program. The first 3 months is about your mission. What's your dream? What's the thing you're going to give your life to? Because most people are giving their life to paying the bills, to worrying about the future. It's it's consuming them rather than the thing that's worth your life. When we talk about legacy, man, what's worth your life? So that's what I really, man, that's what I love. That's what I believe it as men, as leaders, as husbands, as fathers. If we're not encouraging that, what the heck are we doing?
exactly right. Now, you work with fellas from all different walks of life. What's the single belief holding most of them back from becoming who they've meant to?
Mate, I think it's well, the I see a lot around identity because I suppose what I talked about the initiation was get drunk, get a girl, get into a fight, whereas there's a process, that you can go through, and it's not, I mean, that's one thing. Yeah, it's validation, really. It's knowing you're good enough. And I mean, you can have. I think what happens is in a lot of scenarios is people will encourage us, but because there's that broken trust, in people, there's that lack of faith. I mean, all of us have been let down, but it's really yeah, man. It's who you're knocking around with, you know. It's like what I said, I'm going to Florida tomorrow. You know, man, the first time I went there at the start of the year, I had bug trouble with flights. It took me 36 hours. 4 different flights. I went to Turkey, I was in Miami. Yeah, but you know what? For what I got out of it, it was amazing, life-changing. I'll do anything to get in the right room. I'll go anywhere. I'll pay anything. I don't care. I always I love when people when guys say to me when they look at different programs that I run and they say, "Oh, what's it going to cost?" I always like to say, "Do you mean which cost are you talking about? Do you mean the cost of not doing it, or the cost of actually doing it?" Because quite often the cost of not doing it, it costs years. It costs marriages. It costs businesses. It costs your heart broken and staying broken. So yeah, man. And I suppose this is what to answer your question. Was it the one thing that's holding them back? One of the things that I do, and I've got coming up on the 17th of November, is, and I've been doing it, a little while now, but I've really honed it in on these 4 or 5 day challenges, an hour a day. And day one with this Become a Better Man challenge, it's about locating your enemy, locating the thing that is holding you back, is distracting you, is taking you out, man. So in day one, that's when we talked before even the call started. You said something about the style of leadership, and I suppose the style that the way I've been mentored and coached, which I think is the best way, and the way I like to do it, is I don't like to tell anyone anything. And probably if you ask men that have been through my different programs, a lot of them will say, Gav just seems to ask the right question at the right time, on the back of the right story. So that's probably when we go through the Become a Better Man challenge, that's what we do. We locate your enemy. What's the thing that's taking you out? And then we get into day 2 around what do we actually need from men? What do we need from women? What do we need from this world? You know? And so by the time you're 2 days into it, I've had men go, you know what? And I wouldn't suggest it. They've said, I've already got way too much out of this. Like, I can't digest this. The truth is that probably the 4-day challenge should take probably 6 months. But hey, man, if you want things to change and it's about action, man. An hour a day, man. Have a big bite and chew like heck.
Exactly. What was I going to say? A lot of men, they come looking for a how-to. The answer's not in the how-to. This is where we don't tell them how to. A good coach always asks questions. I had the privilege last weekend to sit and I broke bread with a gentleman by the name of Jack Cohen. He's known in Australia. You probably might have heard the name. He's the fast food king. He brought the first KFC to Australia in 1966, built it up. He built up Hungry Jack's and went through all the legal wars with Burger King and the licensing here in Australia. And he's 35% Domino's owner. So he's in his 80s. Most humblest man you could ever meet. Can barely get the correct pair of loafers on to match his suit, right, for a photo. That doesn't have holes in them. That's how humble he is. Lives in a beautiful house in Sydney by the cliffs and drives a 10-year-old car. You wouldn't think he's a billionaire. And the best advice he gave me, and you could probably share some light in, is most people, or most men in particular, get coached on how to, when we should be provoked and asked on why not. What's your thoughts on that? I know it
Yeah,
hit
yeah.
me.
I actually did a video, it might have been yesterday or the day before. And I started with, if I had $1 for every time somebody said, Gav, just tell me what to do and I'll do it, But that's not the masculine journey. That's if you want to be a robot, or I would actually say my thoughts on that, and I suppose that kind of style of coaching is, in the Bible, it talks about 2 sorts of males, boy and man, right? And that worked for a couple of thousand years on record, right? Looking at the old book. But in the 1930s, right, when things started to change, the 40s, the 50s, there was in the English language, they had to invent a new word. It's called adolescence. So you're not boy, but you're certainly not a man. So then that gives, and I kind of laugh because I think, I think about my grandfather, what he would have said to my father, or my father's grandfather, because my dad's told me a lot of stories about him, mate. They would have got the biggest foot in the backside. It's like, mate, step up, grow up, take responsibility. Right? But I think when that word was maybe invented, I wonder if somebody's mum had some influence. Didn't want little Johnny to grow up. He's just a little boy. so I think, mate, there's this adolescence where there's all these boys in men's bodies. And that's really, hey, this is what we're seeing, 36-year-old men living with their mothers, ringing their mother up. Oh, how do I do this? What do I do? And of course, when we've got those kind of males having babies, having sons, having daughters, goodness me, I see that's kind of where we're at. And then that's where we get to answer your question. Just tell me what to do. I'm a baby. I'm undeveloped. I'm an infant, is what it is. So that's the way and I've had some over, I've been coaching men full time since 2009. That's all I've done, man. Once I realized, and the truth is, I started my journey in 1995 when that guy poked me in the chest and said, "There's something more in you," you know. And since 2003, I actually started training blokes and coaching. But since 2009, man, that's all I've thought about really, last 15, 16 years. And the amount of men who just want to be told what to do. That's why I say, grow up, grow a set of nuts, step up. Like this is your opportunity to grow.
Exactly. We're also being conditioned with technology, YouTube with another secret video, or the internet. Jump on Google and get another worksheet or a podcast. The secret source is on Google. It's all that how to, until we become so inundated. Our emails become so full of these how to programs that we don't progress. We become the full time man child who needs his nanny to raise
Yeah,
him, instead of growing up and start asking the hard questions and getting around solid leaders, uh, models. I'm very
yeah.
model.
Well,
Mm. Yeah, so society's kind of at fault at that. However, it comes down to the individual. One's
look,
a t-
I,
one-
I don't I don't know. I don't want to blame society. I want to say it's the men. Because when the men step up, it gives everyone else permission to do the
no,
same.
exactly.
And I mean, all we can do is take responsibility for my house, for my garden. Back in Genesis 2, man, I actually did a good piece. Well, I think it was a good piece, actually, on the Christian radio station Vision yesterday in Brisbane, actually, in Brisbane. Yeah. So, and they said, what does men need? And it's great. They get 800,000 listeners. Such an honor. It's the fourth time I've done it the last couple of months. I'm privileged, man. It was such an honor. But I remember I said to him, and one of the ladies, the host, she was asking, "Why do you always talk about men?" She's like, I don't know. I don't know if she was offended. What about women? And I said to her, "Well, listen, Genesis 2 at the start, it took Adam, formed Adam, breathed life into him, and put him in the garden. And in that garden, right, he gave him a job. Some versions it says work, joyful work. Do the garden, tend the garden. Mate, pull the weeds out, man. Do some. The second thing he gave Adam, is he said in 2:17, he gave him willpower. Right? And this is what I'll answer your question. Give him willpower. So you can do whatever you want, Adam. All this is yours, man. Just don't touch that tree. That one's going to kill you. You'll know death and life. You eat that apple, that tree. He gave him will, right? And then the third thing that he gave him, he's looking at in verse 18, 19. He looked at Adam, and I'm paraphrasing the scriptures, obviously. He looked at Adam, he goes, "You need a helper. I'm going to make you a woman." Then Eve come too. But the thing is, when it comes to that middle one, because God gave us three things, and that's the base of every man. You know, you have work to do, a mission, a purpose, a joy. You have your own will, and that's where men are lacking, because they've failed to develop willpower. And I'm a faith man, right? But you need substance. Do what you say what you do. You need to go the distance, even if, man, like you, people are trying to talk you out of it. That takes courage to follow your heart, as I said before. But you've got willpower. And I always say, in the DNA of every man is a warrior. We're actually built for battle. We're built for work. We're built to go all in. But if we have not developed that willpower, man, we're soft. We're infants. We're undeveloped. You know. Yeah, I always, for years, like for 10 years when I run that men's program, Fight Like a Pro, okay? And really what it was an initiation and validation process. I just used boxing because blokes wouldn't come in for that, but they come in because they wanted to get fit or learn how to fight. Yeah, what's that old saying? Tell them what they want, but then really give them what they need. And that's what I was doing there. But so many men would say to me, Gav, how the heck did you fight for 18 years? How did you get out over the nerves? I mean, you never get over the nerves. You just learn to live with them. You know, particularly when I got towards the end of my career, you're fighting the best in the world. It's dangerous, man. People die. So you learn to live your life as a man. As leveling up in your as a husband, as a father, as a leader, as a business owner. You learn to do it afraid. You learn to do it not having it worked out, but you know you're good enough. You're tough enough. You got what it takes. So
Exactly.
did that help, mate, answer your question?
Yeah, it certainly did. It certainly did, brother. It certainly did. Thanks for that. As a father of 7, a proud father of 7, what do you want your children to learn about manhood?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, well, mate, I learned, and anyone with a child that's starting to walk and talk, and my eldest is 27, and she's amazing. She's planning a church in Mexico City right now. They're 3 weeks in it, man. Talk about a battle. And my other son, my oldest son, he's 25. He just come back from Patagonia, right back to he's all over the place. And man, what the one thing? What was the question again? I got sidetracked, mate. The one.
As a father of 7, what do you want your children to learn about manhood from
Yeah,
how you live, not what you say?
yeah. And that's the whole thing. What I learned was kids don't necessarily listen to what you say, but they copy and mimic everything you do. And particularly having 5 daughters, I kind of, uh, my mum and dad are amazing, but they had stuff, right? Whereas my old man's in and out of jail 3 times, like up to a year at a time. There's a whole heap of stuff that happened. And kept happening for a number of years till they sorted themselves out. I love them to bits, man. They had the biggest comeback turnaround story and have lived an amazing life. Like, man, just so one of the things having 5 daughters, I never wanted them to end up with a guy like I was. Early days reading some books when I started having some daughters. Oh my goodness. When you have your first kid, when I had my first child, I realized I got no idea what I'm doing. Right. So I went on like, what do I do? How do I do this? Like I started to learn, man. I started to talk like what I need a mentor with kids. You know? Um, so I've kind of over time, particularly my older girl, and I've got the most stunning daughters, mate. Um, I've attracted a lot of young men, a lot of young boys. So, there's a process, is what I'm getting at. What I want to teach my kids, that there's a process to the masculine journey. There's a process to actually partnering with somebody, a husband, a wife. There's a process. So one of the things, and particularly the last, when I got out of my gym in 2019, and that's when I put my first book online, write a passage book online. And I always want to do what I love, I ain't never going to not do what's in my heart. So I got a property back in the Gold Coast. I got this paddock in front. So I took my gym out of my boxing ring, and I put it in the middle of my paddock in front of my shed, which I set up as an office. And I had my horse, my boxing ring, my men, like I was, man, living the dream. But I used to get so particularly my daughters, when there's a process, as I said. So when a young bloke would ask them out, and if they wanted to take them out, I'd say to them, well, the next thing is you ask them to ask me. So quite often I'd say, oh yeah, we'll come out and we'll have a chat. So I would sit them at my desk in front of the boxing ring, and if I thought they were of integrity, right? If I thought they were up for it, which, mate, they always seem to. My daughters would not. They only attract good men, right? So they, so at the end of it, I would say, great. And I'd say, have you ever boxed? And they'd say, "Oh, generally no, big footy players or whatever. But then I'd say, would you like to? Oh, yeah, maybe one day. So I just start gloving them up. And I put them in the, and I just put them in the, and obviously I'd, look after them. But what I would do, I would test them. I would test their makeup, their character, their staying power, their grunt, and I think, over time, even with the whole the masculine journey, this initiation and validation, the last, from 2019, I stopped doing 3-round fights as a way of initiation. I started doing 2-round fights, and then the third round you go until your best come out. So always the rounds are 2-minute rounds, but the last round, when there's no finish line, you just go until either you're knocked out or I stop it. Right. So sometimes that last round would go 10, 12 minutes long, and I just stop it. Say, man, there's just 2 winners here. And particularly, in the middle of a paddock, and I just have men only nights. Imagine dark, fire around the outside, 150 blokes there, man. It was the best. It is the best.
Wow.
So I'd just go with them until they were spent, until they were done. And then, there was always I suppose, I wouldn't say a different conversation, but a real conversation. And there's a level of, I suppose, not that there wasn't respect, but the respect level went maybe from whatever it was, it went right up. And when I say, listen, can I trust you with my daughter? And I'd pause, they would think about it rather than say, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. After a testing process like that, and you know what? Most of the time I do a couple of dates and my daughters will go, I'm done. And the poor bloke's been through the ringer. But, every time I'd see those young men afterwards, they would always come and look me in the eye, shake my hand. There was a level of respect. There was something that had happened between us. And like you mentioned before about with all this technology and everyone's an expert, man. Everyone can AI the greatest whatever, you know, and but this masculine journey, only one man can initiate another man, So yeah, mate. So mate, I could keep talking, man.
Certainly. Well, we're both very passionate about men's work. I come from a very similar background through the Mankind Project and now recently with the Primal Man, which is conscious leadership mixed with that warrior sort of form energy, initiation style where you're challenged. Very, very, very similar in a lot of ways. So we relate really well. I'm initiated in both communities, 2 different styles of initiation, although the same. Um,
Mm.
it's beautiful. It's beautiful to watch men change their lives for the better and come out of that initiation with a massive awareness piece, and not just an awareness piece, an actual action plan to go forth and implement. Yeah.
Oh, mate, mission is what I'd call it. Like even recently, a guy did our Become a Better Man challenge. Probably not last one, the month before. He's 74, and he goes, "Gav, I'm staying in. What else you got?" Like at age 74, he understands there's more in him. I think even yesterday, right? A local heavyweight. Yeah, he had his first pro fight the other week, and so when I get back from America the week after, I'm teeing up some sparring with him. Right, because I don't care how old you are or what you've done or haven't done, we must keep testing ourselves. If we don't, we just get soft. And I remember I used to hear it a lot in when I had the boxing gym and run the Fight Like a Pro program. Men would come in and start telling stories, courageous stories about that day they did this, they won the grand final, they did this, that. And it was really sad because I remember a lot of blokes, I'd end up when I got to know them, say, we said, when exactly was that? And it was like 25 years ago, and they're still talking about. So that was their thing that they were basing their identity on, was something happened 25 years ago. Well, I think, man, that's, even in my rite of passage book, there's a guy in there, a story in there of a guy that had his first, all his life, all he wanted to do was test himself in the boxing ring. So when he was age 9, and he ended up having his first fight on his 70th birthday weekend at the Gold Coast Casino, mate. Biggest night of his life. Amazing, So,
Wow.
man, but this was the thing with Paul, Barefoot Paul, right? Thing with Paul, he had this saying in that group, it was there's guys in 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, up to, like, say, 70. And he had this saying that I picked up, and I've used ever since. When was the last time you did something for the first time? And if we're always looking to do something that we've never done before, it means we're going to keep growing. It means we've got to stay humble. I don't have it nailed, man. I'm looking to renew Gavin Topp. It says in the Bible, we're transformed by the renewing of our mind. We must think different to create different, and
Exactly.
and like what we talked about before about what was that you said about? Oh, anyway, forget about it. Anyway, and you see, I don't know, I forget. Next question, mate. How we going?
How's faith? We keep coming back to the Bible and the faith. How's faith anchored you through your mission?
You know, one it's everything. Like it says, you can. It says in the Bible, you can gain all these riches, all these wisdom. You can gain all the things in the world, but then if you lose your salvation, who you are, man, knowing your Maker is everything. And I think I've seen it in myself. I recently spoke to a group of men and about, and I actually ended up doing a video on the YouTube as well, about pride. I remember, um, remember going from food vouchers to having 4 houses, Australian champion, dozen men working for me, more money than I even knew exist was coming through my bank account every week. Okay. And I remember being I didn't know I was arrogant. Okay. But I remember, and the attitude was, what's wrong with these people? Every time I buy a house, I make 100 grand. And that's like when you can buy houses for 150,000, you know? And, I was like, what's wrong with the arrogance? I remember this is how bad it was, mate. I remember driving up on the way from Gold Coast to Brisbane, right? In a brand new SSU, red one, tearing up the highway at 150 kilometers an hour, right? And I remember looking behind me in my rear vision mirror, and the police were behind me, right? And this is sober, right? This is doing great in life, right? And I remember looking at the rear vision mirror, and I thought to myself, what the heck do they? And I didn't even back off. I didn't take my foot off the accelerator. Right? I'm doing 150 Ks in 100 zone. They come out, they pull out, right? And then go past me with the lights on, right? And within 5 minutes, right, I caught up to them because I'm going so fast. They were actually involved in another car chase, right? So that, like, man, the pride, there was that day, and then the same day, I'd already brought this other house, and I was waiting for it to settle, and I had the best of everything money could buy, right? Everything I thought that would make me happy, right? And I remember thinking, I'm standing outside of this house, and I started to think back to something that happened to me 3 months previous, okay? And you talk about faith, right? And I remember I was in Canada fighting for a Commonwealth title there, fighting a guy ranked number 6 in the world. And it was probably, I bit off more than I chewed, that I could chew, I think. But hey, man, I'm game. right? And I was the champ in Australia, but it was too big of a step. It could have been a couple of steps in between. Anyway, I trained so hard, I actually ended up with chronic fatigue, right? And I get over there, I thought I was okay. And I remember getting over there and I was fine 3 days into it. I'm hitting the pads, get over there 10 days before. And long story short, mate, by the time I got to the fight, man, I couldn't even do my boots up. And of course, it's televised in 32 countries. There's 10,000 people in the stadium waiting for me to come out. You know, you can't say, I don't feel like it tonight, right? So, mate, I'm committed. I go out there. Before I go out there, I'm in this change room. I shut the door. It's dark. I'm crying, and I get this picture that come in my mind of my in my nana's house, right? And when my dad would go to jail, we'd go and live with her, right? And she'd take me to church, right? Old school Catholic church. But she had this old school picture of Christ, right? So throughout my life, well, like I was going to commit suicide when I was younger, as a kid. I put the rope over my head, and I thought, oh, I'm going to do this. And then I remember I was going to glass a bloke in a nightclub when I was 16. And I remember the same thing happened again. This picture of Christ and this feeling of peace and love come on. And anyway, this same feeling and picture coming, going, getting ready to go for this fight. Man, I go to this fight and Christ saved me that night. I did the 12 rounds. I mean, I could talk for an hour on that, right? But I remember, we talk about faith here. I remember getting everything in this world. I'm outside of this house. I'd had this experience with the police in the morning. I was there was a guy in a milk bar, local milk bar. I remember walking out with my kids and my wife, and he bumped me on the shoulder. I said, "What's your problem?" And he's like, "Well," and as good as a coach as I am, I couldn't coach him out the store to bash him. And I'm the champ. I end up, he was hiding in the milk section down the back corner, and I didn't want to mess my mate's shop up. I was off my tree, Craig,
Wow.
right? We're talking about faith, and my wife, and I'm having, and all this, I'm having all these. This is a crazy day with the police, with 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 this guy in the shop. I'm thinking about what happened to me 3 months before. That Christ saved me that night. He got me through that 12-round fight. I got the bejesus kicked out of me. I don't know how I stayed on my feet, right? And and as I'm having all these crazy thoughts, I kind of almost, I felt like I prayed. I said, God, I can't keep doing this. It's like a bit of humility come in. I can't keep this up. And literally a moment later, my wife says to me, "Hey, such and such invited us to this Easter production, this church." And I'm like, okay. And I remember going there and I remember thinking, what is Easter about? Because I know it's about eggs. And mate, I walk in this church, right? And I burst into tears. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I hope nobody sees me. I'm embarrassed. I'm crying. I sit down, I hide in the dark, and this Easter production happens. And it's the death and resurrection of Christ. Mate, I don't know what happened, but it was like God showed me a story of my life, how he'd always been there been there since I was a kid, when I was going to kill myself as a 10-year-old, when I was getting kicked out of school, when I was getting beaten up as a 14, 15, 16-year-old, man, when I was going to glass that guy in the like when I was in Thailand and I was on LSD and I was getting chased by 4 homosexual guys and I ran off this cliff. I don't know how I didn't break my back, but God was there. And as I'm listening to this production, man, I thought God has carried me my whole life. I can't even explain it. Like all this is going on, I couldn't explain nothing to anyone. I can now, but at the time I didn't know, you know. And at the end of the service, the pastor, Eric, he goes, "Hey, listen, if anyone wants to give their life to Christ and say goodbye to the old life raise their hand. And I remember thinking, I'm actually not going to do it my way. Like, I don't know how long I'm going to keep. And literally my hand went up and I went, you're kidding. Like, it was like somebody put my hand up. So I grabbed it, pulled it down, and mate, that was the start of my faith. I got another mentor to mentor me on this walk with faith. But I remember one of the things that was in that thing, it said that God, and mate, I was actually reading it. Where I'm going to read it. Yeah. Well, basically, what it said was what it says that God. So I grew up thinking I was an accident. Okay, I was not planned. My parents would say, "Oh, we got married now, we're gonna have a baby." No, I got one time. I was an accident, right? And but there was a scripture that they read out. It said that God, and what I received was God needed a Gavin Topp, so He made one. He needed somebody who was okay to go through all that stuff, all that junk, and come out the other side. Look, God called me before time even began. And it was like, I'm not an accident. God planned me. I didn't plan me. So mate, that was the start of my faith journey. And I thought, I'm not going to do it my way. Whatever He wants, I'll do. And that's when I heard the voice, Him say, I got a purpose for you. There's a plan attached to your life. There's a reason you went through this stuff. So, man, my hand went up, man, and that's been me. But what I've learned is there's always more. There's another season. The God is the God of seasons. You're never there, man. You're always on your way, though. So
If every man listening could hear one message from you right now out of all of this.
faith is the answer. Christ is the answer. A mentor said to me a long time ago, he goes, Gav, you can read this book for your entire lifetime and still be fascinated. Man, the answer to mankind's problem is in the Word of God. A lot of people will say, oh, I know my truth, and that's like your God. That's not my truth. It's rubbish, man. That's what I call pride. Jesus said He's the way, the truth, and the life, man. And there is no other way. So that's the one message, man. You want to find your purpose. You want to find your mission. You want to find the plan for your life. It's in the Word of God. But it takes courage to say no to the world and say yes to Him. I mean, hey, mate, and like literally all the wisdom. A program that I'm doing while I'm going to Florida. It's actually called the King Solomon program, the wealthiest, wisest man in history. So I'm actually, that's where the truth is, man. I want the good stuff.
That's
So
right.
that's,
Right.
hey,
Yeah.
boom.
That's right. Very good. Yeah. So from the ring to the forge, Gavin, brother, you remind us that strength without purpose is just chaos. But strength, forged through identity, becomes legacy. The Greeks had a term for legacy called aetonum. It's mark of the immortal, and you certainly left a mark for younger men, for your children to follow. Steps, breadcrumbs, that bouncing ball as that guide. If today's conversation hit home or hit something deep, don't just nod and move on or scroll on to the next Spotify episode or the YouTube episode. Ask yourself, where have I been performing instead of embodying or aligning self? Where am I drifting? Where should I be forging? This is your moment to reset, to lead, and to rise. Gavin, brother, thank you for leading from truth and for providing or proving that men don't need fixing. They need forging, initiation, and rites of passages. To connect with Gavin and his work, Visit manalive.org.au.
Mate, I would say go to Gavin Topp with a double P, gavintop.com. And in fact, mate, I've actually got something in there. It's called for free. Just I wanna help every man. The 8 biggest secrets. The 8 biggest mistakes successful men are making. If you go to gavintop.com, type that, get in that email, and that'll get you. But of course, there's the Become a Better Man Challenge, the ebooks. There's Shalot.
Follow Gavin Topp on Facebook. You're on Insta as well and YouTube.
Probably the best is the Gavin Top YouTube channel or Instagram, Gavin Lance Top.
Beautiful, beautiful. And if you're ready to take the next step in your own identity evolution, you can also join me for an Arate Virtus Identity Forge. The first gate always opens with one decision. Until next time, listeners, we're all on all platforms. Focus, forge, and ascend. Thank you, Gavin. Thank you for your time, brother. Until next episode.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Bye for now.